call it a freak ankle injury that happened yesterday in practice.
Ugh.
And this is this is that lightning strike that can happen at any time, whether it's practice, whether it's game. You just never know. And we've been insulated from that because I think the practices haven't been as intense as maybe they would otherwise be in past years in training camp because they're focused on getting guys in shape and keeping guys healthy and keeping guys ready.
Yep.
And we haven't had the cross-pollination with joint practices and preseason games. And now here we are, week 1 of intense preparations, and there's a freak injury, and Von Miller, by all appearances and based on all reports, done for the year, Chris. Huge blow to a Denver defense that was counting on him to get back to form this year.
Yeah, huge blow. Huge blow to all of us. I mean, come on, this is one of the better defensive players in all of football. He's a superstar. He's a Hall of Famer. And as far as the Denver Broncos concerned, I mean, we were excited because we wanted to see what we thought had a chance to be one of the best pass rush duos in football between him and Bradley Chubb. We were cheated of that last year because Chubb got hurt before last season. So now here we are again with, one less person a part of the duo here, and it changes the way I think about the Denver Broncos to a degree. They have a young offense, a lot of new young parts, let alone it's a new offensive coordinator, and we know we had the pandemic and all of that. One of the mainstays of their football team was, hey, Vic Fangio was here. This is our second year in the system. Von Miller, the 3-4 defense, getting another year underneath his belt with that. And really, maybe being able to rely on that defense if the offense is stubbing its toe a little bit early in the season because they're young and a Jerry Jeudy and a Drew Lock and a Noah Fant. Maybe they're not hitting on all cylinders in the Pat Shurmur offense. So now this takes away a little bit of that insurance factor of their defense, and that's where it's a shame because I'm a big fan of Von Miller.
Yeah, and it really raises questions about his future. Next year is the last year of his contract. $17.5 million this year to not play. Not that it's his fault, but that's what the Broncos are going to be paying him. Next year he's due to make $17.5 million. Final year of his contract. He'll turn 32 in March. So, and there's always been kind of this vague sense that at some point the Broncos are going to decide it's time to move on from Von Miller before he gets to the end of his contract. Well, there aren't many more chances for them to decide it because next year's it. They're either going to move him next year or they're going to keep him or possibly find a way to extend him. But he's going to be 32.
Yeah.
And after this injury, you're going to have questions and concerns about when he's going to be 100% again.
What's the dead money, Mike, for next year? You got that in front of you right there as you're looking at it?
He is dealing with not a lot of dead money. He's got about $8.45 million in prior bonus money that he's yet to hit the cap. So it's 4.225 this year, 4.225 next year.
Right.
Not nearly the kind of crippling dead money that you would see with other guys early in a contract. Usually when you get to the back years of the contract, there's nothing left. He did a restructuring of some of his bonus money a couple of years back, and this is still that overflow from that. Otherwise, you'd have none right now. And there would be no cap consequence of moving on. The question is, do you want to pay him $17.5 million next year, or do you want to find someone who would take him? Does he want a fresh start? Is this kind of a weird way to, deal with latter years of his Broncos career? And does this make him want to begin again with a new team? But it raises a lot of questions,
it definitely
short-term and long-term for the Denver Broncos. And this is at a time when Bradley Chubb is back.
Yeah.
But is he really back?
Right.
He's less than a year removed from a torn ACL, and they say it usually takes at least a full year to even begin to get back to normal. And now he's the guy, and I don't know that he's ready to be the guy.
No, I hear you. You're right. You're right. That's the saying. It's usually your second season off of an ACL injury where a player comes back and goes, okay, I feel 100%. I doubt that Bradley Chubb feels 100% right now. Hopefully he can get to that point, at some point halfway through the season, wherever that is. But yeah, I don't expect him to be a dominant force as far as off the edge right away to start the year. I mean, that's what was great about the combo. Von Miller, who I think had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder with the way things kind of unfolded last year. It was less than up to Von Miller's standards or his bar there. So, yeah, Mike, and then you look at the guys that are behind Bradley Chubb and Von Miller, it's not necessarily the greatest group of guys there, too, where you're going to feel comfortable about, okay, they'll be fine. Shaquille Barrett's there. They had him at one point, right, before he went to Tampa Bay. They'll be okay. They'll be able to make it. There is no guy that jumps out on their roster like that to me, and that's where it's disheartening, Mike. And as far as you're talking about, this could be it for Von. I mean, you're right with Denver. I never really thought about it, but the severity of this ankle injury, I think, will go a long way to see where the future lies for this. Because if it's an Achilles tendon, that would scare me that, it's going to be a little while before he's back to 100%, and maybe they do move on and find a new home for Von Miller.
And we've seen it before. Once you tear one Achilles tendon, and I think it's medically proven, you become more likely to tear the other one, whether it's compensation, whether it's just genetics. It's happened to one. It's going to happen to the other one eventually. But you really have to get to a point where you ask yourself, from the financial investment that's being made in Von Miller, is it worth it? And that's something that every team does all the time with every player on the roster. You tear the name off the back of the jersey. You disregard who it is. You make that cold, dispassionate decision because that's the way NFL football teams and really every Major League sports team is run. They're interchangeable parts. Even though kickers and punters are the most interchangeable, they're all inevitably going to be gone. So you always have a plan for replacing them, either because of injury or they want out or you want them out or they've gotten to the point where they're too old to contribute to at the level their pay would suggest. They're all going to be gone. So you have to have a plan. And John Elway, the GM of that team, and he one of his first drafts, I think maybe his very first draft with the team, he got Von Miller.
Yeah, I think it was. Right.
But here we are 9 years later. How much longer can this dance last? And it could be that yesterday's injury is the thing that really pushes it toward Miller ending his career somewhere else. And there's been that consternation in the past. There've been, I think at the end of the 2019 season, or 2018, there was a weird vibe about Von Miller and the Broncos and how long is this going to last. He's been bracing for it. From the moment he signed that long-term contract that he had to fight for, I think that taught him what a business it really is. And he understood at some point the team's got the power to say, we're just going to rip up this contract and see you later. And if you brace for that long enough, you eventually just get to the point where you want it to happen and get it over with.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, well, yes, to a degree, but I do think that Denver's a special place for a guy like Von Miller. Like you said, they drafted him, the number 2 pick in the draft coming out of Texas A&M. Of course, he's had some special seasons individually, let alone was a part of a really special season in that Super Bowl year where you could argue he was one of the best defensive players in football. One thing you can argue is he was the best defensive player in the playoffs that year, whether it was intercepting Tom Brady or sacking him all day in that AFC Championship game out there in Denver, or then, spearheading the charge for a defense that almost single-handedly won the Super Bowl that year. I mean, it wasn't the offense, that's for sure. And he was a big part of that, getting the strip sack fumbles and causing all that havoc back there. So this is a Hall of Fame type player. I don't think you can part ways with a guy like this easily. And I don't know, Mike, he might have made enough money and feel comfortable enough there where maybe it's one of those things where he looks at it after this year and gives them a hometown discount. I think Von Miller's that type of guy to where he might not hold their feet over the fire and be comfortable just in his niche in Denver and go, okay, this is where I was drafted. This is where it's going to end.
That's the kind of comment that got you a side eye.
Yeah, from Dak Prescott.
So be careful projecting that attitude you have for the hometown discount onto others. They may not agree with you. And the bottom line is if he's healthy, he's still one of the best pass rushers in football history. And it wasn't that long ago. It was before last season where Peter King did the math about what it would take to catch Bruce Smith for the all-time sack record, and Von Miller was on pace. Well, last year was disappointing. There it is. There's the Dak Prescott side eye. The pace has been disrupted dramatically for Von Miller between last year, which was very disappointing in Vic Fangio's first year as the head coach, and now this year, nothing. So it really raises questions about his future, what he wants as a football player, what the Broncos want. And maybe the Broncos are just going to say, screw it, we're shifting to offense. Defense doesn't matter in the AFC West because you ain't stopping the Chiefs anyway. Let's put our resources in trying to outscore them. And it's going to be arena football in the AFC West if you want to be successful moving forward. So instead of paying Von Miller $17.5 million next year, they can either spend that on someone else or bank it on, guys like Drew Lock who'll be eligible for a new contract after next year. And think of that 17.5. It just flashed in my brain. Next year, there's a chance the salary cap will only be $175 million.
Right.
That's 10% of the cap going to Von Miller.
Yeah.
at a time
No
when
way.
you're not sure whether or not he's going to be healthy and effective. They're not going to do it.
No, I don't think so.
The more we talk about it, the more convinced I am they're not going to do it.
No, you're right. The more you start to hear these facts of the matter and all of this, I agree with you. Now, it will depend on the extent of this injury, and we'll see how severe it is. But I'm scared. And when they say a freak injury, too, the first thing my mind went to is, wait, Achilles or some sort of like dislocated ankle where it, maybe ripped up a tendon or something like that. Either way, it's not a good look, especially for a guy where his living is flying around the edge with 300-pound, people on his back as he carries them around the edge trying to sack a quarterback. You need your lower legs and, of course, need great strength there.
And this is the reality that we're now in. It was the Teddy Bridgewater freak injury during a practice a week or so before week 1 of the regular season in 2016. And this is just part of what we have to brace for, whether it's games, whether it's practices. We're back in that mode now.
Yeah.
We were lucky, and players were lucky through much of training camp that it didn't happen, maybe because it wasn't as intense as it could have been. But now the question is, are the bodies ready? And are they going to hold up when the intensity increases? And it's going to get very intense starting tomorrow night when the Texans play the Chiefs.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.